The bus company, whose driver tried to kick a blind man and his guide dog off the bus, has apologised and is promising better training for its staff. George Taggart tried to get on the Wellington Metlink bus outside the Blind Foundation in Adelaide Road yesterday with a group of blind friends who all had white canes, and George had Guss, his poodle guide dog. Guss was wearing a harness and guide dog tags, and George was carrying photo ID that identifies him as sight impaired and Guss as his assistance dog, who he describes as his best mate. George explains what happened next.
I stepped up on the bus and the driver says, "Get off my bus." And I said, "I beg your pardon, this is a guide dog and I'm allowed on the bus with my guide dog." And he said, "It's not a guide dog, get off the bus." And I said, "Well, look, he has, my dog's got a harness on him and he has a collar with tags on it that identify him as a guide dog. And I have a passport in my wallet." And he said, "I don't care, get off the bus. I've got a job to do," or something along those lines. And I said, "No, I'm not getting off the bus." And he said something about he was going to call the police. And I said, "Well, fine, you call the police. I'll just stand here until they come."
The driver then radioed someone, and after much back and forth, George and Guss were eventually allowed on the bus. The experience has left a bitter taste for George, and he wants drivers to be better trained to help sight-impaired people where needed. Scott Gallagher, the General Manager of Metlink, and he's promising to do just that.
We apologise unreservedly for the treatment that he experienced. That is not in line with our expectations or our policies associated with anyone who is blind or low vision who travel on our Metlink network.
Have you apologised to George personally and directly?
Not at this stage, but I am wanting to be able to reach out to George to do it personally. I've already had some communications with Blind Low Vision New Zealand, and I'm making it very clear that what occurred is simply not good enough. We apologise. I would like to take the opportunity to meet and talk with George personally. And again, it's something that the overwhelming vast majority of times this has not occurred, but it has, and we apologise for that.
It is the second time, George says, that he's been treated this way on your bus service. Why do you think that that's happened? The drivers have said, "That's not a guide dog, get off my bus." Why do you think that is happening?
That is something I would love to work with George and also Blind Low Vision New Zealand, as well as our operators and drivers, to get to the bottom of, because the treatment that George has been experiencing is not in line with our expectations.
Well, what are your expectations, particularly when someone turns up with a dog in a harness? It has a guide dog tag on it, and the person with it, in this case George, had identification, photo identification, showing that he was sight impaired and that Guss, the dog, was his guide dog. So I can't see how this went so horribly wrong, so I'm wondering what your expectations are and if your staff are aware of what those expectations are.
Lisa, our expectations are very clear in terms of anyone who has that identification card who is blind or low vision, then they are fully welcome on any Metlink service, and all you need to do is produce that card for our staff. Clearly what has occurred is not in line with not just our expectations, but our policy.
Have your drivers had any training specifically around helping people with disabilities and vision impairment?
Yes, Lisa, as far as I understand, on a regular basis, we do a range of trainings, including on disability training. But to be honest, since we've become aware of this, we're reviewing things and wanting to make sure that all training and material that we make available to our frontline staff is clear enough and effective enough that all of our staff has clear appreciation of our fundamental expectations on how we treat people who might happen to have any sight impairment.
Because obviously, I mean, it looks like that training's not working, given what's happened. So George Taggart is a volunteer trainer and has spoken to other transport services and offered advice and, well, workshops in essence for assisting people with disability. He's offering that to you. Will you take him up on that?
Absolutely. I would welcome the opportunity to meet up with George, welcome the opportunity to work with George, and also I'm noting that I have already had some communications with Blind Low Vision New Zealand, where again, I've been very clear that I would welcome any opportunity that we can work with that organisation as well as George to make sure that we have the right training in play and all of our frontline staff, all of our amazing frontline staff have the right training so they can make the right choices when someone like George wants to board one of our services.
Scott Gallagher there, the General Manager of Metlink, and we'll check back to see what happens.